What's up, you guys? I had an interview with Joshua Spodek, and this is just one part of it. I think that you guys should watch this entire video series from part one if you can. So if you haven't watched part one already, start at part one and watch through it. Every single part of this talk was amazing. A lot of it was very motivating, very powerful, and I just found it so important in terms of learning about leadership and how to lead in the environment. It's a fantastic talk. If you haven't already, I highly recommend starting from part one. This is part three, so let's go. Thinking of nature as that thing that you go to visit on the weekends or that you go to see during the summer, you're distancing yourself and you're kind of blinding yourself from a deep connection that allows you to, feel less.
And by flipping that around, if you choose to participate in it as much as you can, as much as you want, mm-hmm. there's no end to the joy, to what it brings you. You can try to shut it out. A lot of people think it's mm-hmm. like, I don't want a cockroach in my apartment. So you make it as pristine as possible. I certainly do in my apartment, but I love scavenging and I know the berry trees all near me and things like that. And mm-hmm. I love going to the farmer's market and all that experience of it. If you shut it out, you actually can't shut it out because you have to breathe, you have to drink water, you have to eat.
Sure.
And to the extent we mentally shut it out, we distance ourselves from the dioxins and the PCBs and the PFASs and also displacing the land and the wildlife, the people from the land and the wildlife, and the pulling straws out of turtles' noses. We can act like it's someone else. We can act like we can let the addiction speak and say, oh, those people shouldn't do that stuff. But mm-hmm. taking responsibility for how your behavior affects others. Well, let me speak personally. Taking responsibility for how my behavior affected others. At first, it was painful. And now it's the best part of my life. I don't not fly to avoid seeing my nephews who are overseas. I'm not flying because I love them. And I've seen the predictions. Mm-hmm. And I want them to have a beautiful world. Mm-hmm. I want them to live long lives. I'm not willing to look across the ocean and say that happens over there, but not over here, with regard to, say, plastic pollution or burning oil wells or banana plantations where an overwhelming number of the workers, their kids are born with birth defects. Mm-hmm. I'm one with them. I'm not going to separate myself from them and say someone else, the corporation does it, the government, only they can change. They will change when we change. Mm-hmm. And it is incomparably more rewarding. The feeling of stewardship, the feeling of oneness is that every religion chases, that every spirituality practice chases, is available all the time. Mm-hmm. And one can equally shut it out anytime they want as well. Mm. And if seeing the Eiffel Tower is worth it, it would be nice to fantasize to live in a world where it was rainbows and unicorns coming out the back of the jet, but it's not.
Right.
And to me, that is also part of nature, is to say it's jet fuel. I know how it works. I know what it does. Mm-hmm. And embracing that means that I'm connected with everyone, not mm-hmm. denying that so I can disconnect from the people on the receiving end of it.
Right.
I don't know how this sounds. I mean, I'm not trying to influence anyone. I'm sharing. This is actually me talking.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if this is effective leadership or ineffective or counterproductive.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to lead right now. I was like answering your question.
Well, I think
at length.
Yeah, no, it's very, very good. It's good to hear. I think one of the main reasons that I started Verdant Growth is because I was listening to your podcast all the time. And I think one of the most effective ways one of the most effective ways that your environmental message resonated with me was that you had so many stories and so many experiences of your own that you were able to share and tell in a way that was like it was meaningful. It had emotion, and you're explaining it and telling those stories made me feel like, wow, that actually sounds amazing. That's actually something that I would really like to try to apply to my own life. And I would want to experience that kind of feeling for myself. And so that was a big thing.
Well, that's great. I can't tell you how heartwarming that is to hear, because I get a lot of people download the podcast, but not a whole lot of feedback back.
Mm-hmm.
So hearing that tells me that it's helping people live lives that they want to live.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely helped me.
Glad to hear. And then you're helping others.
I'm trying.
Because I'm not just trying to help people to change their own lives, that is, change their own behavior as it regards the environment. The original title, Leadership in the Environment, leadership first. I'm not in it for autocratic, authoritarian solutions. I'm not in it for, let's sprinkle some powder up in the air that will reflect the sunlight, and maybe there'll be some unintended consequences, but we'll find that out later. I'm into people enjoying the process. The leadership is the emotional experience of joy, of something rewarding, something people like. Mm-hmm. So that I don't hear anyone, I do not hear anyone sharing that you're going to like this. And that's the top thing that I'm trying to share. Not because it's necessarily most important, because it's important to share the facts and figures and the doom and gloom and telling people what to do. But that's management. And management without leadership is very limited in what it can do. You generally won't change systems. You won't shift a system from one system to another. You'll only make that one system more efficient. Mm-hmm. And sadly, our system produces all this waste. Mm-hmm. We're not lacking efficiency. We're drowning in waste. So to make a system that produces all this waste more efficient means we'll produce waste more efficiently.
Right.
Which is what's happening. More waste with less effort.
Right.
We're largely sedentary, something like 40% obese, 80% overweight and obese. Effortlessly, like we press a button, we just tap the phone lightly, and someone drives a 2-ton vehicle, themselves lightly pressing on a pedal, lightly touching a wheel, polluting more than ever. Whereas and so I don't want to make that system more efficient. I want to change the system. That's leadership. That's changing values, changing stories, images, beliefs. These are the tools of a leader. So I'm not trying to tell people what to do. People are like, tell us what to do. I'm like, you got that. If you're not, that's out there. Anyone right now, just type into the computer 10 tips for the environment, and you'll get millions of them.
Yeah.
If you're not doing it, it's not because the tips aren't there. And for me to tell you one that you're already not paying attention to, tell you yet another of millions that you aren't paying attention to, that's not the problem that I'm trying to solve. I'm trying to solve that you're getting the information, you're getting the tips, and overwhelmingly, we're not doing them.
Right.
Not sure if you can hear this. Here's some burning some fossil fuels out there with the someone's chainsaw thing.
There you go. No, that was actually one of the things that I wanted to talk or ask you about today. There is so much advice out there. Just like you said, you can go out on Google and you can find so many things of things that you can do to improve the environment. I am guilty of putting a ton of that stuff out on the internet myself. I do that all the time because it's stuff that I wanted to know. I go out and I search for it and I find that information out on the internet, and I take the ones that I feel like are the most important and things that are meaningful to me. And then I say, hey, these are the things that I'm trying to do in my life. If you are looking for something to do, here you go. Here's some things. But how much value do you find in those kinds of tips and advice when they're just put out just as is? And no, don't feel like you have to hold back just because I've put out that kind of information.
Well, the advice has been, you can go back to the 60s and find advice like that. And you can, what's a good measure? Parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, mercury in fish, plastic in the ocean. You tell me, how effective has it been? And what about, and actually another measure would be how much joy people are finding in environmental behavior. Before COVID, the United States was, I think, opiates are this huge problem that got eclipsed by that. That's misery. That's not people happy. Mm-hmm. You can talk about the Sacklers pushing it on people, but actually there's nations in the world where you can just buy opiates over the counter and they
Mm-hmm.
don't have the addiction that we do here. So I'd like to measure the happiness of people, the lifetimes, how long the lives are becoming shorter. So I don't think it's, by those measures, it doesn't seem to be particularly effective.
Mm-hmm.
People look at living sustainably as a burden and a chore and deprivation and sacrifice.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So
education is important, but only education is not going to do it, because we've seen plenty of that up until now. Is that right?
Well, this project-based learning, that'll make a big difference. But if your lecture is, I would distinguish from, there's different kinds of education.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to give people an experience. I believe that some people use me as a role model, and I'm happy for people to use me as a role model. And I want to bring up more role models. I have not seen simply giving people facts and figures effective, but it's necessary but not sufficient.
Mm.
So if people don't know the facts, it's very easy for them to say, oh, well, it's not really that bad. So you do need them, but you can't stop with them.
Right.
And the attitude, I think, as a professor, as a project-based educator, I begin with empathy. Why is the student in my class? What can I find out? I can't usually find out from like 30 or 40 people all in like the first session for them to tell me what motivates them, but I can get them to feel it. So I have to find out, I have to bring up in the other person the feelings, the emotions, what they care about. And once that's out there, then to give them a way to act on those things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the emotion, it's the empathy, it's the listening. That's the starting point. Not what do I think they need to know, but what do they care about? Mm-hmm. What are their priorities that have been shoved, that they've been keeping down because maybe the addiction speaking or whatever? And how can I make them want to act on that? That's mostly about support. It's about listening so that they don't feel judged, so that they can share these things and have them out. Because if a person cares about the apple tree that was at the end of their block that was cut down to make a shopping mall, and I tell them 50 million people are going to be displaced from Bangladesh, I've just told them, your apple tree doesn't matter. It's so small compared to what's going on in the world. Well, if the apple tree motivates them, I've just disconnected them from what would actually motivate them.
Right.
And if they say, well, this apple tree, and I say, apple tree, Bangladesh, they're like, oh, sorry, I won't mention the apple tree anymore. And now what? Now they're not going to act because of what they care about. And maybe you'll get compliance, but you might reinforce that actually your experience of the environment doesn't matter.
Right.
If by contrast, I say, apple tree, oh man, that reminds me of my sledding hill. What's your apple tree? Tell me about that apple tree. And they talk about the time that they would, now I'm thinking about, I just picked one out of the blue. And although I use that example a lot. And I remember visiting my grandmother, and we walked a couple blocks to her neighbor's apple tree, and we picked the apples and we made an apple pie. Oh, and while we're making the apple pie, I said to her, hey, grandma, whose apple pie is better? Yours or mom's? Her daughter's, yours or my mom's? Because my mom made a point of, she went to state competition with her apple pie. She had to make an apple pie, and her cherry pie is really good.
She's competitive.
And, so I said that to my grandma, and she was like, oh, ha, ha, ha. And she like passed it off. And I was like, no, really, which one's better? She's like, oh, go on. And like a third time, I was like, come on, which is better? And she goes, well, Josh, I won't answer your question, but I'll tell you this. I taught her everything she knows. So this is what happens. It connects with nature.
Right.
It's always stuff like this. And people share stuff like this with me. And when that comes out, then I say, act. I invite you at your option. I say to act on that. And I have to listen to them and support them, because most of what they come up with is like, I'll go without straws. It has nothing to do with the apple tree. It's just what they read in the New York Times or Greenpeace. But when they actually act on the apple tree thing, and they come up with something. Actually, one guy, he was I think he was from Kazakhstan. And this is just, he was the husband of a friend of mine. And he said that where he grew up was where the apple was discovered by humans, like millennia ago.
Wow.
and the apple has like spread out to the world from there. And there are places, people have like bred apples to get different flavors and so forth.
Yeah.
But there are ones there that never left. They're only there.
Really?
And some of those groves of apple trees that grew there for thousands of years, and who knows how long before that, are housing developments.
Oh, geez.
He has seen it happen in his lifetime, and it's happening faster and faster. Now, this crazy thing was, I asked him, I invited him as an option to do something to act on those feelings of the loss, and it's like profound, right? And he came up with that it's like on Fridays he wasn't going to take taxis. He was going to take public transportation. This was pre-COVID, and I was like, that doesn't sound like I didn't say like that sounds like a weird thing, but in his heart they were connected,
right?
And he was avoiding taking taxis one day a week because of the apples. And my guests, when I had them back the second time, they're like, I didn't realize what I could do could make a difference. One guy said he was going to go for a week or month, not using any coffee cups. Right. So he'd bring a mug and he would get coffee every day. So all he did was bring a mug with him. At the end, I asked him how it went. And he said, at the beginning, I would get coffee as an escape from work. I wanted to get away from work. So it was like an escape.
Mm-hmm.
When the baristas, he had to explain to them why he was bringing a mug suddenly. And then different ones at different times, he had to explain it all the time. And he got to know them. He spoke to them. And he said, it began with getting away, but it switched to going to. I wanted to meet my friends, the baristas. This happens all the time. This is, if you keep drinking, you don't get to the other side.
Right.
And so that's why I'm saying what these people did, but you have to go back and hear what's the emotion, what's the feeling, what's the connection, what are the images, what are the stories,
right?
What's the community? This is the domain of leadership, and this is where I'm not the leader that I could be yet. I'm on my way. But when you read Letter from Birmingham Jail, Martin Luther King shared what it's like to be a Black father in the Jim Crow South, looking in his daughter's eyes and saying, I'm helpless to do, that we're living as second-class citizens. I'm treated like called worse. Yeah, obviously I'm not going to say the word that he's called, but he's,
sure.
And I can't imagine looking in my child's eyes and saying, I'm helpless.
Yeah.
I can't be what I believe a father should be. And that was an understanding that I believe, in Birmingham jail, when he was arrested for nonviolent civil disobedience, the white religious leaders of the community said, outside agitators, wait, it'll happen soon enough. And I think it was published in a book, Why We Can't Wait. And they were trying to connect with the community and say he was an outsider, that they were all outsiders. And then he shared his experience, his painful experience. And I believe that connected with, I believe more people connected with him than with the ones who said, who didn't experience it, who didn't open up and share their pain. And yeah, I don't like not seeing my nephews. They're in New Zealand right now, and they've been living there for a while. And I didn't see them when they were in Fiji either. I hear Fiji's beautiful, but it would be less beautiful if I flew there.
Right. Whew.
And I know that future generations, including my relatives' descendants, will look back at the people who took leadership roles now and acted, and they will look back the way that we look back at William Wilberforce or Dietrich Bonhoeffer or Oskar Schindler. And that is the opportunity. That is that human connection and service to others. There's not a Grand Canyon or Eiffel Tower that can compete with that.
Right.
If I lived in a different world, I wouldn't say that. But the world that I live in is so efficient and so connected that I affect everyone
Mm-hmm.
when I take a taxi instead of walking, when I save a few bucks by shopping at Trader Joe's and getting stuff that's their whole business model is package it all together. I suspect that if you weighed the food in Trader Joe's and weighed the packaging at Trader Joe's, the packaging is more.
Right.
Instead, I go to the farmer's market. And I hope that the laws change so that the true cost is reflected in the price we pay for all this stuff. Because as we all know,
Sure.
someone's got to pay for that packaging for, 500 years from now. Maybe 1,000 people will still be dealing with that garbage.